Hello friends, hope you are all well. Welcome back to my channel The Passion of Life. So today I am going to share with you a beautiful Chicago architectural boat tour video which is on Chicago River, and that is 156 mile long and goes through the city of Chicago, including the center of the city, that is the Chicago Loop. So it's a wonderful experience to view the city from the boat. So please keep watching the video till the end, and I hope you will also like this unique architectural boat tour video. And now we are boarding onto the boat, and here is our tickets. So everything is ready, so stay with us.
Big white box marked life jackets. Also right down here when you get on the ramp, please use the handrail when using the stairs. It is a little windy, so hang on to hats or whatever else you may have that may blow away. If you are sitting,
like the captain said, the bar is open downstairs, so feel free to make your way down there, especially right now while the boat is not moving. So we're going to touch upon a couple of major architectural styles on our trip. So first off, neoclassical Beaux-Arts style, okay? And we see an example of that over here to your right with the kind of the almost the yellowish style building. That style was very popular late 1800s through the 1920s. And then just beyond it there, another style that we're going to be seeing on our cruise is the Art Deco style. So that is our the Chicago Board of Trade building, 1930, right there. And as you can see, there's a pyramid at the top there, and then we have Ceres, because it is the Chicago Board of Trade, Ceres being the goddess of grain and agriculture. And then another great sample of the Art Deco style is over here on our left. That is our main post office for 70 years, completed in 1921. We're going to come back to that a little later on. But the great thing about Chicago is if you're away for a few years, it's always growing. There's always things going on. For instance, just beyond the post office there is what is now Union Station Tower, being built right next to Union Station. It's going to top out 54 stories. It's going to be completed in early next year. Some modernisms, some modernist style architecture or international style, and also postmodern. And what does that mean, postmodern? It just means after modern, okay? So we're right in front of us here are these two grand, the big brother and the little brother, Willis Tower, which anybody from Chicago calls it the Sears Tower. Tallest building in the world for 24 years when it was completed in 1974 through 1998. Tallest building in the world. Now it ranks number 16. The Sears Tower is where Sears consolidated its headquarters here in Chicago. It was the #1 U.S. retailer for over 50 years, from the 1930s through the 1980s. We'll take a little pause going under the bridge here. You know who took over as being the #1 U.S. retailer there in the mid to late 80s? Anybody want to just shout it out? Walmart, exactly. And now it's Amazon. But yeah, that is tops out at 110 stories. Our observation deck, or the sky deck, is on the 100. So just in front of it, just to its south, is a great example of postmodern. Now this was completed in 1990, right here at 311, the pink granite building. This was completed again 1990 by Cone, Peterson, and Fox. And they had a daunting task of having to build such a great structure right next to the Alpha Male, which I think they did a pretty good job. So what we're doing here is we're going through what is really a kind of a modernist area here. All these buildings really went up over the 50s and 60s and 70s, built with some context where you could tell where they were coming from, and I'll point out some of those to you shortly. Over to our left, if you look underneath there, those are railroads. So these buildings are built right on top of the railroads, and the buildings all have to pay what is known as ear rights. They either bought them outright or they're leasing it back to the railroads who own the property down there. And then this is where you're going to have the railroads coming up from the north, and then, or I'm sorry, up from the south and down from the north that are meeting there at Union Station. And here you can get a slightly better view of it right up here. And again, the Sears Tower, the biggest tenant, because Ludwig couldn't get any commissions, he ended up leaving Germany in 1937 and comes to Chicago because he has an offer from the Illinois Institute of Technology to be the Dean of Architecture and also to be in charge of building out that campus. Coming up on our left, this is one of the completed in 1929, and this is a tribute to Howard Carter, the archaeologist who discovered Tutankhamun, because as you can see, it's actually designed to look like a sphinx sitting on the river. This is one of the first buildings to really have appreciation for the river, because cantilever style. They're behind it. But yeah, this is the headquarters for Boeing. Coming up directly ahead of us is 150 North Riverside, and this was quite an architectural feat. How they built this with the V, but an incredible engineering feat. No buildings had been there for 80 years until the Getz partners were able to put together the modern engineering to build that structure. And the guys behind him weren't too happy, and there was our L train going across the bridge here. And as you can see, they only hire short tour guides with that bridge. Yeah, so be careful if you're tall. And also, if you see, yes, Conagra. So also, if you notice the 8 busts there, those are the Merchant Kings. Montgomery Ward, Sears, Marshall Field, Woolworth. These were all some of the early investors in this property here. And in the front of it here is over 2 acres here at the front, and they do what's called an Art on the Mart. It is a digital display synchronized with music. If you're down here between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m., that's when they show it. So if you happen to be down here, you can just walk down to our river walk and take a look at the digital display that they have. And as you notice, we're going under a number of bridges. I'm going to talk a little bit about the bridges in a little bit, but these are known as Chicago bridges or Trunnion bascule bridges. All right, and they're like drawbridges. They had a remote system we only need 1 bridge tender now, but before in the day you needed 2 bridge tenders. So the extra 2 are just for symmetry. What we're coming up to here next is one of the oldest buildings that we're going to be passing on our tour. This is the Reed Murdoch building. This was built 1914, and what it was a warehouse. So this is what buildings would have looked like back in the day. Here on the left here. On the west side, there's 5 bays, right? And then on the other side of the clock tower, there's 6 bays. The reason for that is when they expanded LaSalle Street, they actually moved the building in. They took down one of the bays and just moved it over. But now it's a mixed-use building with restaurants on the ground floor and commercial space above.
River roast.
Is Trump Tower, designed by Adrian Smith, completed in 2009. He built this in conjunction with Skidmore, Owens & Merrill, but Adrian Smith was the designer. Adrian Smith has gone on to build some of the tallest buildings in the world. He was the designer of that Burj Khalifa, which is you'll see how it's set back to pay homage to the buildings around it. For instance, the Wrigley building, which is right in front of us. Now this is the building that Gum built. This is the Wrigley building. William Wrigley, this was his corporate offices for his Wrigley, the Wrigley Candy Company. We had a World's Fair here, 1893, it was called the White City, and this was the type of building that would have been representative at that World's Fair of 1893. He was there. He introduced Juicy Fruit Gum at that World's Fair of 1893. He was such a big fan that he wanted his building designed in that fashion, that bows up. So our modern cathedrals are these beautiful towers. This was actually part of an architectural competition back in 1921. Colonel McCormick, the owner and editor of the Tribune, put out this contest, several entries, like over 100. The guys that won did their homework. It was Howell and Hoods out of New York. They knew that Colonel McCormick served in World War I. He fought in France. Dollars a plate, but you have a beautiful scene on the Chicago River. They don't have commentary, they normally have music. So the Columbus Drive Bridge here, this actually went up. We went underneath the Michigan Avenue or the DuSable Bridge. That was built in 1921. This was built about here because this is more Lake Michigan water than it is Chicago River water. So this is probably the cleanest that the Chicago River is. See, we've got some kayakers over there to our left. This is where they would rent the kayaks over here on our right. So we're coming up to Lakeshore Drive. And then they stopped the building of it because of the Great Depression until Roosevelt got involved and made it part of his Public Works Act. And it was finally completed in 1937, and Roosevelt, FDR, actually came to Chicago for the dedication of Lakeshore Drive, a place that he helped to build. So we're going under Lakeshore Drive here. Over to our left here, this is going to be another park, the DuSable Park, named after Jean-Baptiste DuSable, who's given credit as being the first non-native founder here in Chicago. They stopped construction on it, as you can see, because they found out that the land there was a little polluted. They're going to have to go in and replace all of the soil there, because that is where we had industry. There was a lighting factory there. Navy Pier here, up to on your left side here. Navy Pier was built in 1960. It was a design from Daniel Burnham, one of the gentlemen that helped to plan out Chicago separately. But it became Navy Pier after World War I, was a service to the Navy. And it became a naval academy during World War II. We had the first George Bush went to the academy there, where he was learning how to land and take off from these different aircraft carriers that they created. They put them on top of boats. They were all wooden, and then they dragged them out into Lake Michigan so that the pilots could practice landing and taking off from these, what would be the aircraft carriers. And there's something like over 300 planes that are still out there in Lake Michigan from some of these crash landings that they had. So after the new Sable Hotel, those three structures that are identical, and this is the first season that they've been realized. They just built that hotel there on the Navy Pier, but definitely worth the visit. The bridge there, it was renamed a few years ago the Jean-Baptiste DuSable, because again, he was considered one of the first non-native inhabitants of Chicago. When he settled in Chicago in the late 1770s, and he would have settled right where that Apple store is. That's known as Pioneer Court behind it, and you'll see there. You'll notice if you're on Michigan Avenue that there's a bust to him up on top there. Went up in the 1920s, and the whole idea was to beautify these buildings along the Chicago River and transition it from this dirty, gritty, industrial and warehouse district that was along the river into this mecca of modern architecture. London House Hotel, that was realized in 2016. The building that dates back to the late 1920s when it was originally built. It gets its name from the London House Jazz Club that used to be on the ground floor here. This is where we get Ramsey Lewis, the Ramsey Lewis Trio. He was the house band for several years. How they designed these buildings, it was a city ordinance that you could only go up 20 stories, and then you had to have a setback. And that's where it goes up an extra 10 stories. But because of the city ordinance, that's why it looks that way. We see a couple of examples of that. In New York, they were worried about the shadows that were being to the Chicago River. And so there's a real effort going on these days to reintroduce some of these native species back into the Chicago River. Up here on the left here, this is 333 West Wacker Drive, or the Nuveen building. And it's a great example of contextual architecture. As you can see how it's going to curve with the bend in the river. So they would store meat products, other different products in here. It had no windows. So when Harry Weiss, the great Harry Weiss, came along for this project, he rehabbed it back in the 1980s, and they had to punch the holes into the building to create those windows. And it also took over a year for the building to thaw out before they could even start working on it, because the walls were 2 feet thick. They put insulation in there. They used horsehair. They used pork. This is also a building. These are the river cottages. These were also designed and built by Harry Weiss. The man loved his triangles, and partly because he was a great proponent of sailing and a big fan of water, the river. And this is considered River North, and this is where you'll find some of the finest restaurants in Chicago here. And also on Kinsey there is a nightclub, a speakeasy called, and she wrote a play in 1925 that was called Chicago. Okay, excellent. Yeah. So this is where it all started. So this is the Montgomery Ward complex, and they say that back in the day this was his fulfillment house before it would get shipped down to the post office and mailed out, because it was completed it opened November 5th of 1929, just a few days after that stock exchange. Just like the Chicago Board of Trade, we had a number of traders. So in the middle here, the new post office that went into effect in the mid-1990s. Our old post office here was kind of vacant for 20 years. From the 1990s really up until 2016, 2017, where a New York firm came in, they bought it, and then they dumped millions into it, actually $1 billion in the restoration of it. It's a gorgeous building. That's now where we have the headquarters for Uber, Walgreens has been in there, Pepsi, a number of corporate headquarters are now in the old post office. It's massive.
You're gonna get one of mine.
So now we're making our way south. Would everybody like to know Chinatown? It's now in prison.